I'm super geeked to be doing this for anybody who's watching. This is Peter Awad, and we've been friends for what, like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. We got introduced through kind of the Allsmith growth network of
Yeah,
founders. You kind of came on onto the founder roster, you peeled out, that sort of stuff. And that's kind of the world that we live in, I think both of us, which is that, yeah, we're kind of in this world of kind of post startup founders to some extent and trying to help folks who are still in the journey. And so
totally.
Peter's kind of superpower is definitely on the leadership kind of development and coaching side. And I found you really insightful throughout, the year or two that we've known each other. So I thought it'd be really cool to like, let's do a session of like talking through a couple of things that we encounter often around leadership stuff. We're both in the world of, um, we've led organizations. We're still leading organizations, but then now also we're advising a lot of people who are leading them. And I'll tell you what, it is 10 times easier to see the problems that other people are dealing with than to see your own problems yourself while you're leading it yourself.
Totally.
And I think that's actually kind of a gift that you have, which is that you get to see this across a lot of different founders and CEOs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So let's like talk through a couple things. I kind of volunteered to be kind of like a live specimen. Let's like, if you want to do some exercises or something like that to kind of demonstrate the stuff that you're seeing, I'm happy to kind of be the guinea pig. I got nothing that I need to, yeah, I don't know. I'm an open book. So whatever you want to do in this, I'm down to do it. So let's jump into it.
Rad, man. I love it. Yeah, I'm excited. Excited. And it's super exciting to see and it's, you try not to project as a founder, but you can see folks that are maybe like earlier in the timeline. You're like, dude, I know what that feels like. And I was there and let me help you along sort of thing. And it's kind of fun because you get to collapse the timeline for people. You're like, hey, listen,
Yes.
this is how these things go. And here's a couple of things that you can do to like skirt around some of those landmines, right? Or make them a
Yeah.
little less painful. And so it's really, really fun for me. A little bit of background, five-time founder, recent exit of the fifth company, and husband, father of four, follower of Christ for those that's important to. And I'm just passionate about unlocking leadership potential. And you think of the story of like, I think it's a statue of David, and he basically said like, "Hey, the statue was already in there. He just chipped away what wasn't him, right?" And I love
Hmm.
that because I'm not giving people any ingredients. It's just helping to unlock what's already there. Like we've got that leadership potential, but a lot of times it's either nature, nurture, or a combination of the two in choice, where you're just not able to like get through that leadership ceiling. And sometimes we don't even know that it's a leadership problem. We don't even
Hmm.
have that vocabulary, but we're just like, man, there's something just not there. Like people are leaving or they're not staying, or you get a lot of leaders that are like, man, I wish my people would just do what they're supposed to do. And one of the things that you and I were talking about before we started is like, you can't lead until you know how to lead yourself. And so we
Yeah.
got this phrase, know yourself to lead yourself, which is a tool that I'm excited to take you through live and basically learn this together, so that people can see what it looks like to go through it, because then you can start to you can see it in yourself and unlock yourself. Then you can start unlocking other people in your organizations. It's super powerful.
Totally.
I'm going to share a couple of slides here, and like I was telling you, I don't want this to be super slide heavy.
Yeah.
um, we're going to just kind of bounce back and forth between the two, and let me get rid of, let me do
As
slide
you're pulling
one.
this up, I'm kind of curious, did you have somebody for you that kind of did this? For me, I had like a handful of founders who were further ahead than me. I feel like anything that I learned about leadership, I learned on the job the night before. So it's like, okay, how to manage someone, how to give negative feedback, how to give positive feedback, how to like write like all these different things. It was literally like the night before cramming. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is that like that you get to learn a ton of stuff last minute.
Yeah,
And it's kind of an embarrassing job because everything you do is for the first time in front of a
yeah.
crowd. But it's really useful. But I don't know. Did you have somebody kind of in your life that was like a couple steps ahead that you like kind of looked over their shoulder as you went?
I definitely had a mentor, probably, halfway through my entrepreneurial journey. I started pretty early, and he would give me all kinds of advice. And the thing that's interesting is like, I look back, I'm like, man, that advice was so good.
Mm,
But there's a couple things. One is like, I maybe was a little bit too dense to even understand what he was saying at the time, or I didn't have the life experience to understand and really soak it in. But I also felt like, man, this is kind of a waste of time. Like
mm,
I've got work to do. Like everybody
yeah.
just do their job. This is too
Yeah.
fluffy. And then realizing like, no, this is how you make the things happen. So, I share with a lot of people, like, I love EOS. I love traction. I love scorecards. I think that stuff's super powerful, whether you're into that or some other process map or whatever. doesn't matter, whatever your, your flavor is. I think those are super important. The thing to realize though is that behind the metrics, behind the scorecard, the people entering these numbers, they're people. There's people in
Yeah.
there. And if you don't know how to get through to the people, well, then the process doesn't really necessarily matter. It's only going to get you part of the way there. It's kind of a band-aid.
Yeah.
But man, the 1-2 punch of knowing how to communicate and unlock the leaders that are in your business, the people that are on your team, and have the processes, like that 1-2 punch is so powerful, Blake. And so just some stats, it's like the average
Mhm.
team is barely over 50% efficient and effective, right? And that's because they like 82% of team members feel misunderstood or undervalued. They don't feel like they're heard, and leaders undermine their influence and they don't even know it, right?
Mm.
And so it's like a lot of these things, a lot of the friction have to do with people. And I talked to a lot of founders, especially the ones that are just like, super driven, and they're like, man, I just hate the people part of this business. And it's
Mm.
like, but every part of the business is people. Like, I know software is eating the world, but what's behind software is there's people. There's people, right?
Yeah.
To some extent. And your clients are people and your vendors are people. And so if you can figure out how to unlock that, then man, that's like a serious superpower, but it's not easy. And so a couple of things really quickly is I like to think about these tools for work and for life. Because a lot of times when I'm working with clients, they're like, man, this worked really well in the business and with the team. But man, I use this with my wife, or I use this with my husband, or I use this with
Totally.
the right.
I I feel like I learned how to run a family by running a company. Like
Yeah.
I took those tools and immediately applied them at home, and it's probably my family's probably thrived more than the company did because I
Yeah.
did it the second time on my family.
Because we're leading there. Like we're all
Yes.
leading there. We're leading at home, whether you
Yes.
like it or not. You are leading. And if you're not married, you're leading your community. You're leading your family, your friend group.
Totally.
And so that's one thing, or a good reminder. Blake and I are here fighting for your highest possible good. Like this content is so that you can be better in life and at work. This
Great.
is content that's being invested in you, and so whoever's watching this, like, understand that, and understand that we're both here to help. I know that you've got that. Sorry, I'm speaking for you, but I know it's true. Like we're both here to help.
Yeah.
Like this is like our passion is to help people grow and expand, people and businesses, right? So just a quick
Yeah.
reminder. Um, and so just thumbing through this real quick. These are, like I said, a lot of leaders are like, show me how to fix my people. It's like, wait, it starts with you.
Yeah.
And
Right.
looking back, like you said, did it have any help? I'm looking back early on. It's so embarrassing, dude. It's so embarrassing thinking about like what I said to my team members early on.
Yeah. Dude, if
And
you're not embarrassed by what you did in the past, then you haven't grown, right? Like that's actually that's a sign that you've grown in some way, shape, or form. If you feel like,
yeah,
man, 5 years ago I was a rock star, then what have you been doing for the past 5 years?
totally, totally, man. And then, like we said, it's like leading others begins with leading ourselves well first, right? This is a little bit of a sideboard of a tool, but I want people to park this in their brain because I think it's good for yourself, but it's also good for your team. And it's also good for hiring. This tool helped me to understand why a good hire on paper didn't work out.
Hmm.
And what we're going to be working on today is this PQ, right? This personality intelligence, this self-awareness. But these three pieces are really important. And so
Hmm.
sometimes we'll hire on IQ, like, man, this person has an incredible resume and they've worked on some really cool things. They're really brilliant. And then they don't work out and you wonder why. It's like, well, they didn't really know themselves and didn't really know others. And so the
Hmm.
core, you think about exercising and having a really strong core, like you need a strong core in order for it all to work. And so if somebody's really intelligent, but they can't work with the team, well, forget it. We've seen that happen before,
Yeah.
right? Or they just don't know themselves. Like they're a know-it-all. They haven't grown, like you just said. They don't read the books. They don't want to like expand they're having some self-preservation, which we'll talk about later. That weak core with this Venn diagram, like it doesn't overlap. It
Hmm.
causes a lot of problems. And so today we're working on PQ for yourself as a leader, this personality intelligence. So just park that tool in
Very
your
cool.
brain, right? And so I'm going to skip all these stats. So a couple of tendencies, a couple things to think about. Like you want to be healthier. For me, this is me. I want to stop being so short-tempered. I used to say
Hmm.
like, man, I wish I was just more patient. Patient Peter, like how can I unlock patient Peter? Where is this guy?
Yeah.
Right? I just wish I could find him. I wish I could become that person, and realizing This is the tool that we're going to park on for a little bit. I had the tendency to be impatient. It's probably not going to go away.
Mm.
Like it's part of how I'm wired. It's part of what makes me really, really good at certain things and insufferable at others, right? So I have this tendency to be insanely impatient, short-tempered,
Mm.
right? And so what I was talking to you about before the call is like you have these tendencies and patterns that we just can't, very, very difficult to change.
Yes.
What we do have control over is the actions, is how it comes about. And so what I used to say for my impatience or my having a short temper is if I just could get this half second pause, if I could just like grab my tongue before it starts, like words start tripping over my teeth, man, my relationships would be so much better. And even especially at home with my wife, like, man, just that half a second before I say something stupid because I just like, I reacted. How could I do that? And I realized that I want to become an active listener. I want to seek to clarify. And so when I feel myself getting short tempered, and that pattern for me is when I feel myself kind of welling up, getting red in the face, my chest gets tight, I
Hmm.
remember to clarify. And so instead of reacting and telling you how stupid you are or how bad your idea is or trying to fix the problem that I wasn't asked to fix yet, I'll say, okay, Blake, can you help me to understand what exactly are you saying? And
Yeah.
that gives me an opportunity to better understand the problem instead of solving the wrong one. Gives me a chance to cool down. And the consequence of that is that person feels heard and understood and valued. And then the reality is we typically find a better solution to the problem than we would have in the begin with. And I've built trust. Like someone who maybe would have been like, I'm not bringing that to Peter. He's going to blow up on me. Instead, now they're going to start bringing me these issues and we're going to shape this thing together. And so
Yeah.
that's just an example of going through this know yourself to lead yourself infinity loop. And it's an infinity loop because we don't ever, this never ends, man. Like
Yeah.
this never ends. Like till we die, we are like uncovering tendencies and trying to reshape the reality.
I love that because you're like my dad has hired a couple hundred salespeople in his life. He's always been in like sales leadership, and he said the number one attribute or strength that he looks for in salespeople is impatience. And I'm like, ooh, isn't that interesting? And he's like, good salespeople have a healthy, he calls it a healthy sense of urgency, aka impatience, right? And it's like if you're comfortable waiting for the other person, he's like, you're not going to be a great salesperson. And so what I like about that is like, oh, that there's a shadow side to that, which is that impatient leaders and impatient fathers do not create a healthy culture. It's like,
Yeah.
but impatient salespeople can close deals. So let's not get rid of the impatience. Let's come up with a playbook of cool in this context. I'm going to use
Yeah.
this playbook so it doesn't hurt the people who are in my care, right?
Yeah.
That it actually will bless the people in my care. I don't know. I feel like it's like a framework shift from like stop being a bad boy, Peter, to like let's get clever about this weird muscle that I've got. And this weird muscle can actually be really useful in this context, and it actually can be damaging this kind. So let's get clever about what's a playbook that I can use to make it work for me, as opposed
Yeah.
to eradicate it. I like that.
It's such a healthy distinction that you just underscored, Blake, because I was meeting with a founder yesterday as a new client of mine, and this guy is an absolute powerhouse in every way possible. And he was kind of lamenting about some of the things that some of the ways that he is. And I'm like, man, but that's what makes you great.
Hmm.
That's what makes you so good at business, right? And so what
Yeah.
you're saying is like, just don't use that tool or weapon or whatever you want to call it in every single situation. Like it needs to be directed accordingly. And in certain
Yeah.
situations, it's like, no, you're going to play with the Legos and be super patient because this is not this is not a mission to
Yes.
accomplish. You know?
Yeah. There's something I think this is a broader topic, but I think there's something about the like what is it the clinicalness of a lot of human tendencies that I think we see right now. So let's call out specifically like around anxiety or distractibility, like ADHD and those types of things. That I think that there are certain behaviors that we pathologize to a place of that's like just always bad. And I actually think that it's I think very damaging to people to be like, oh, I need to fix this thing, as opposed to like, hold on, let's find out, like there's going to be some good, some bad, we got to manage around it. But it's almost like kind of separating you from the operating system and be like, cool, you
Yeah.
got born with this operating system. We got to work with the one that you got, and we're going to get the most out of it possible. Peter's got to get the most possible out of the operating system that you were born with, as opposed to like we got to swap out the operating system. Because I haven't seen people do that really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's
Or
trying to,
medicate or even medicate away the superpowers that you've been given. So it's like, great,
yeah.
you're born a hunter. Let's give you some medicine and make you a really crappy farmer. And it's like, no, like let you be a hunter. And then let's figure out how to make it so you don't starve in between the hunt, like let's figure this thing out.
That's right. Let's not dull the superpower, man. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. You put that really
Yeah.
well, man. Well, dude, putting yourself through this, do you have I'll share it again.
Yes,
Do
I've
you
got
have
one.
okay. All right. What's the tendency you want to put through here?
This is one that I'm feeling. Oh, you and I were just talking about this. Like I'm feeling a little bit tired this week after we did a family camp with our 6 kids. We were staying up to like 11:30 at night with a 2-year-old. Like it was wild. So
Wow.
when that happens, and just in general, I have a tendency. My tendency is towards, I guess, distractibility.
Okay.
And I would say my distractibility has become less bad over time, and that like I'm not, I distract myself with email or like work looking leisure, right? It's like email, Slack, jumping from thing to thing, low level work that's actually non productive, where I would be better off taking a nap or taking a break, but I am incapable of doing that. And so what I
Hmm.
do is I have unproductive periods, specifically in the early afternoon, um,
Yeah.
and then I get frustrated with myself. Or I'll get into a deep work session and then find myself checking a text every 5 minutes. And then at the end of it, look back on that deep work session and say, I think I did probably about 20% of what I'm truly capable of in that session because I gave in to those distractions. And um, that's I feel like so much of my life has been trying to manufacture these waves of hyperfocus where I can crank out a
Mm.
ton, and resist the pull of the distractions. So
Hmm.
like my phone has everything, everything on earth that could distract you is blocked on my phone, right? I have blocking things on but like at the end of the day, those are external things that are not really addressing the internal thing, which is I tend to want to hop from thing to thing to thing. And it's an ongoing battle, but I'm like, I would love to get 45 minutes of Peter's time to talk about playbooks on that. That sounds great.
I love it, man. I love it. So
And
would you
and
say
for
it's
superpowers, guess what? I'm super curious, right? In terms of superpowers, I'm reading 12 books simultaneously. And I love reading a bunch of different books at the same time. And like if I get into a conversation, I know a little bit about a lot of different things because I love to learn. And like I'm listening to a podcast 24/7 if possible. Like I love but so there's a good thing to it, but it also is a pretty bad thing, especially when it comes to individual contributor work.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because there's times where, again, like you can be distracted and do the thing. And there's times where you're like, man, Blake needs to buckle in and like get something specific done, right?
Yes.
Let me zoom in on this a little bit so it's easier to read the bottom part.
Yeah.
And so we'll take you through this matrix. All right. So what you tend to do, tendencies, distractibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the pattern is when you're tired. Is that what you were saying when you're tired or
I
when you're
think, yeah,
overworked?
yeah, it's probably overworked, tired. Um, there's a physiological element to this for sure, which is it's probably post being over caffeinated. I think there's a
Mm,
crash post being over caffeinated. Um, and yeah, but I think tiredness. There's another element to it, which is with the when is also if I don't believe in the work, I think I sometimes use it to if I don't believe in it, sometimes it's actually fruit of a root problem, which is that I'm doing the
mm,
wrong work. And so I just don't want to do it because I know it's the wrong work in my subconscious level, but it's not up here.
okay. Okay. And then action is lack of focus.
It's hopping around from Slack to email to text to LinkedIn back to whatever I was supposed to be working on. to email to Slack to write. You're just jumping around those different things way faster than is productive or useful.
Yeah. So I wrote down the illusion of work.
Yes, it's great. Drives
Okay.
me crazy because I see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a moth to the flame though, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah,
but I just gotta pop in here. Instagram, there might be a bunch of messages in there. They're gonna be
sure.
important. There might be a
Yes,
new client. Might be a new
dude. I
client in there.
Yeah, no, dude. I blocked Instagram a long time ago because that Instagram they have at Meta they have a picture of my face on the wall, and they're like every day they wake up and say, "Let's make sure that guy gets no work done." Like they know I'm their target, so I
Yeah.
no yeah I blocked that stuff.
It's gotten so good. Okay. And
Yeah.
the consequences, what does it tend to cause?
Um. I mean, the big one is I guess the consequence. The consequence is that I'm accomplishing significantly less than I think I'm capable of doing.
Okay.
Um, or the quality of my work is below what I know I'm capable of doing. Um,
Okay.
or those who are in my care are getting a fraction of the attention that they deserve. Um, and then there's like a level where it's just like I don't feel pride in the work that I'm doing because I know I could
Okay.
do better.
Okay. Okay.
I guess the long term consequence of that is a wasted life, and I don't want that. I live in fear of living a life that I regret, and I don't want that. And so I see it, and that's why I'm like pretty like white blood cells attacking this thing of like I don't want that thing to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I can't imagine how many people watching this are feeling this right now. Just
Mm.
talking to a founder about this yesterday.
We
And then reality. And I love the question, what's it like to be on the other side of Blake?
mm,
So when you've gotten through a day like this, or maybe perhaps a week of this sort of lack of focus, what's it like? What do people experience when they're with you?
yeah, that's a good question. There's like I think in terms of people in like Allsmith growth, I've definitely received feedback of like, wow, it's sometimes hard to get your attention, you know, or to get you to
Okay.
fully engage in this thing that's really important to me. You're not fully engaging with it. And it's probably because you don't think it's the most important thing for you right now. And so you're not like, right. Like, and I know that can be very frustrating. I've received that feedback. Um,
Hmm.
that's one. I also think that I can preserve ambiguity in organizations longer than I should. Um,
Hmm.
where and I know that's frustrating to people. I don't just land the plane, or I'll land the plane and then unland the plane. I'll take it back off again on a decision.
Okay.
Where I think it's like I think that that probably is a fruit of that as well. Um, at home, the distractibility. I guess it's like it's more of the illusion of work is that I'm not taking breaks. I work from home a decent amount, and so in reality, it's that I don't come out of my office. Um,
Okay.
so it's not as much a maybe presence of something, but it's an absence of something, which is that I think part of the solution is I should be taking breaks at some point in the day, and I could
Yeah.
engage with any of the other people who live in my house. I could go say hi to them, right? And
Mhm.
like there's an absence of a touch point that probably I could have, but I don't maybe give myself permission to do that or something. On the
Got
home
it.
side, I think the work side it's a little bit more clear, but the home side is probably an absence of thing as opposed to a presence of thing.
Okay. So you're just
Um,
you're absent, and you're absent because you're busy with the illusion of work. Is that, I
pretending to
mean,
work.
okay. 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 Dude, you know what's funny about all this? And this, this is like not, I appreciate you, being a candidate to go through this in front of everybody because
Yeah,
this stuff's hard to hear. Because
yeah,
as you start to
it's hard
die,
to say.
well, bro, as you start to dissect this stuff, you're like, man, did I just say that out loud? Is that really what
Yeah,
I do? I've had so many of these moments where I'm like, man, is that what I do? And you
yeah,
write it down, you're like, this is kind of twisted and weird. And especially what makes it odd is that it's not like you want it.
no, Right.
It's not like this is cake and you're not supposed to eat it. Like you don't even want to eat it,
Hmm.
but you're doing it anyways, right?
Yeah.
And so this is why like unpacking this and writing it down, you're like, wait a minute. Okay. There's like a keystone habit here that I could like replace, which is the action.
Yes, if I had a magic wand and I could change this thing, I think it would unlock a multitude of good things in my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so now thinking about this, and I'll read it through here, and I can screen share too in a second for my remarkable. But
You're on the remarkable. Yeah, something like that too. You got the
are you on it? Okay, sweet,
yeah.
man. I love it. Okay, so the tendency is distractibility. The patterns when you're tired, overworked, overcaffeinated, or you don't believe in the work. The action is a lack of focus, hopping around, the illusion of work. Consequences are lack of accomplishment, low quality, low attention, and you said a wasted life. And the
Hmm.
reality, which I think the wasted life is maybe more of the reality. Reality is hard to get your attention. Lack of committing to the solution is what I heard, landing the plate and taking it
Hmm.
back off again. And then an absence at home. Does that sound like we got it all?
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I think it's helpful.
Okay. All right. So
I would
rewriting
say
this.
maybe the rephrase in the absence is I think there's an opportunity that's probably a missed opportunity as opposed to like in reality, when I'm done with work, I've got some hardcore barriers in terms of distractibility in my home life where
Mhm.
I just leave my phone in a different room. I
Okay.
actually I'm not distracted in the evenings. Like, and that's
Okay.
just because I care about it at a 10 out of 10. And I realized that we literally live in a place where we don't have neighbors because I found that my neighbors were so distracting to me because I'm so extroverted that like we were like, oh, well, Blake can have these low level relationships with a million people in our neighborhood, or we can move somewhere over here and he'll go deep with our family. And so we literally that was why we made that decision. Our big reason why we made that decision.
Wow.
So I'd say there maybe to rephrase, I'd say there's a if there's an impact, a direct impact, it would be probably there's an income impact that think I probably could be doing better in business for our
Hmm.
family. That would be the direct. And then I think there's an opportunity impact, which is like there's probably an opportunity for a break in there that probably would be better for my relationship with my family. But that's not the primary impact, I'd say.
Okay. So less time than possible, right? So you could have more time, more maybe meaningful experiences with your family
Yeah.
throughout the day if it was
If it's all
made.
pretend, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, what can I do at that time?
Yes. Okay.
I
I
could
dig
work
that.
more. I could connect more. There are all sorts of things. Like I sleep more.
I dig that. Okay. All right, that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, so considering I'm going to cut and paste this pattern, tendency and pattern here, and we'll move it down, and we're going to write a new action consequence reality, right? One
Okay.
second. Okay. I just erased it instead of copied it. One second.
You gotta share your screen while I do it too.
Yeah, I'm going to share screen with this here. One second. So I want you to be thinking about, so this same tendency and pattern, what would be a new action that, second here, I could share screen right now. Okay, let me move all this down. But what could be a new action instead of this lack of focus hopping around the illusion of work that would short circuit this this tendency of distractibility? Like what comes to mind for you?
What's a new action I could take to short circuit it?
Yes.
Uh, when I find myself getting distracted, I think leave the digital world for a second
Okay.
and
Okay.
just like I'd say, not counting the remarkable. I think the remarkable feels more physical to me, but I'd say specifically phone and computer. Get away from it. Change seats, sit on my couch, or walk outside for a second and just like
Hmm.
with no headphones and just like be in that world for a second. Um, because it's the ease of switching is the issue. Right. Um,
Okay.
I
So
think
you
physically
find
changing, yeah.
you find yourself like just picking up whatever is nearest to you. And then I guess to press it a little bit, like what has kept you from doing that already? Like why haven't you already done that?
I think some of it's like you don't necessarily realize that you are doing it.
Hmm.
And I think there's small little dopamine hits when you do
Yeah.
it, right? Because you get a new email come in and say, hey, it's a new lead or it's a new connection, and like you want to talk to this person or whatever, like that, right? Um, yeah, so I think it's low level dopamine hits and maybe a lack of awareness that you're doing it until you've kind of gone on. Also, I think it's probably a maybe not knowing what I do after I do that, right? Maybe a low faith that that will make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
so like digging in on, sorry, go ahead.
Also, it doesn't look like work. That's a
What
big
do
one. It doesn't look like work. If I stand up and go stare off in the horizon, that doesn't look like work. Like, right? Like works when you're working. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that I think that's a pretty core thing to me that yeah, I think you don't want to, and that probably goes back to childhood version of working with my dad or, even working early jobs and all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, I want to be seen as diligent. And it doesn't
Yeah.
seem diligent to stare out the window.
Yeah. So what you just stated is like getting closer to the root of why you do
Hmm.
what you do. And that's why I asked the question because leaving the digital sounds so simple, but you haven't done it yet. And you're
Yes.
not, you're a brilliant guy. And so if that
Mm.
simple solution hasn't happened already, um, there's something else there, right? And so just
Yeah.
to underscore what you said about it not looking like work,
Yeah.
I walk sometimes I gotta leave the office. I work from home too. Sometimes I
Yeah.
gotta get out of here. And so I went to the coffee shop, which is my buddy's coffee shop down the street, and I just put in my AirPods with noise canceling. There's something about people milling around where I feel like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
still a human being doing work, but I'm still behind my computer and doing that, right? But I decided the other day to walk there. And it's only like a 20-minute walk. And I
Yeah.
found myself halfway through the walk being like, why did you walk? You've got so much stuff to do. You're such an idiot. Like,
Mm.
this is so unproductive. And I had to remind myself, like, no, man, this is the work. Because
Yeah.
on my walks is when I typically have like clarity of mind and I'll solve big
Absolutely.
problems. Right.
Yes.
And so you have to rewire what work is for Blake. Right. And
Yes.
so for you, it's like, wait a minute. No, dude, I work on like super high level strategy stuff and I need to be removed from the noise, just like you removed your family from the noise in order to
Hmm.
do the deep work. And so for me, it's like, the action is not just leaving the digital, it's planning to leave the digital. And so,
Mm.
like, I would venture to guess,
Mm.
especially based on what you talked to me about before we started recording, is that you knew when you came into work today that you're distracted, Blake. Like you came
Mm.
into work today and you're like, man, this is gonna be a hard day. Like I'm
Sure.
feeling kind of burnt out, feeling a little bit tired. And if you just waited like another probably a few seconds, you'd be like, man, this is gonna be a distracted Blake day,
Mm.
right? And if you
Yeah.
knew
My
that, you
first
would,
my first meeting was at 6 a.m. this morning, and that
okay,
always tends to result in feeling more distracted. Yeah.
okay. So your planned focus time should also have location, and location being away from digital. And so
Hmm.
it's like you had said something like when I feel myself getting distracted, then I can leave the digital. And
Hmm.
I have a health coach, and the health coach is like, you don't get extra credit for self control. And his whole thing is like, yeah, dude. I mean, if you want to have cookies in your house and then be proud that you didn't eat them, cool, but you don't get extra credit for that. Just don't have the cookies in
Yeah.
the house. And so
Right.
for you, the not having the cookies would be like, oh, this is 6 a.m. meeting. I'm tired, had a long weekend. Distracted Blake's probably showing up today. And
Yeah.
so my focus, my deep work time, what I call my fifth gear time, will not be anywhere near anything digital. And so if it's like a
Mm.
2 hour span or a 1 hour span or a half day span, whatever your focus work looks like, you plan for it not to be anywhere near digital. So you don't even start down that path of being distracted, Blake. And so
Mm.
I think the actions would be planning for, I don't know what leaving the digital even means. Like maybe that's like you're working from the calling closet, or I don't know what that looks like to you. Maybe you can be more specific, but like you plan to leave the digital before you even
Yeah.
get there.
I mean, big one, a lot of what I do is write. And so I'd say a big piece of that is do it on the Remarkable where I can't browse the internet on it. Right. Like
Okay.
that's like, because that suddenly now that feels like yeah, there's nothing else to be distracted by. Right. Um, I think that's a huge one.
Yeah.
Um, but do it in a place, do it on a picnic table outside. Right. As opposed to doing it in front of my laptop or something like that. Right.
You got
Um,
it, man. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I would
How do,
just put here, this is not
yeah,
really an action, but rewiring, redefining, sorry, my writing is horrific. Redefining work.
it's great that you brought that up. I thought that was kind of like an unlock when we started talking about it, like the diligent thing. So I grew up homeschooled, and
Mhm.
my my mom had a sticker chart on the wall, and it was for diligent dinosaurs. And if you, at the end of the day, if you were a diligent dinosaur today, you got a dinosaur sticker. And if you got like 10 stickers or whatever, you got to pick something out of the toy bin or whatever. And so I think I learned at an early age to demonstrate diligence,
Mm,
right? Um, the problem is that demonstrated diligence is not a one-to-one with effectiveness,
that's
right?
right.
There's more to effectiveness than demonstrated diligence. That being said, demonstrated diligence is not a bad skill to have, right?
No.
Like as a leader, and actually diligence is a good thing, but like there's more to it. And so I don't know, that brought that thing up of like, oh, that's a skill that I was trained in early.
Yeah. And to further that point, it doesn't just look like the star chart.
Mm-hmm.
It can look like Blake staring off into space because you don't know what's going on in here where he's like his gears are turning and it looks
Yes.
like he's just being a zombie, but he's not. He's like really noodling on a really deep problem,
Yeah.
and finding a solution. It looks like sitting at the picnic table because this guy's cranking out a blog post or an article that's going to redefine X, Y, and Z. And so it's like I think it's understanding that it's not just a star chart, it's not just productivity, it's not just
Yep.
filling out a scorecard. It's like
Yes.
it can look like something else. It can look like nothing, actually.
Yeah. That's good. That's really
It's
good.
good. Okay. All right. So the action is leaving the digital, working from the remarkable. I'm going to actually add in here, it's just planning ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then what would be the consequence? Like what would it look like? And then just because it's fresh, let's say today you planned for distracted Blake, you knew you were having a 6 a.m. meeting. There was focus time on the calendar. You planned ahead. You're like, I'm working from my remarkable at the picnic table today from
Mm-hmm.
this time span. What would this have caused? Like, what would that have looked like? What would the consequence have been today?
Today specifically, I probably would have. I think I probably could have done twice as much. I'm doing some long form writing right now. I think I probably could have written twice as much.
Okay. So let's say 2x productivity.
Yeah. And I think what I would have written could have been deeper, better formed.
Deeper, better output.
Yeah.
And then the reality, like what would it be like on the other side of you? Let's say even post work, or I don't know if you do like a debrief in your mind or on paper right before you leave the office, or
Mhm.
maybe even arriving home and imagining like what would evening Blake tonight look like having that sort of day.
Yeah. I think I feel like I earned the evening, right? You have a sense of satisfaction.
You said earn the evening. It's so interesting the way you said that. Like it sounds like you would feel like, yeah, I earned the right to like set my phone in the cupboard and totally
Yes.
disconnect because I did what I needed to do when I wasn't here.
Yes.
Okay, it's good. Which the reason I underscored that is because you just mentioned earlier the current reality, and the current reality is not spending the time, not spending as much time or as meaningful time as you could.
Hmm.
So what's interesting is what's at play here, I think, just tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you don't have a productive day, it then spills into your evening because you're like, I need to make up for like I didn't get what I needed to get done then.
Hmm.
So I need to spend a little bit in the evening. Or let's say you're not working, but you're with the family, but you're thinking about what you didn't get done today or how
Yes,
much better it could have been.
totally.
And so you're like mentally absent.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah, I think that's right.
Because Blake feels like I don't earn the right to sit here on the couch because I didn't do what
Yes,
I needed to do earlier.
I'm not happy with what I did earlier. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So how does this feel? And then do you feel like you can now then either there's two things that need to happen for you to this for this to become effective. I'm gonna stop sharing. There's two things that need to happen for this to become effective for you because the thing that I'm obsessed about is it can't be inspirational. Like you can watch this or you can experience this with me
Yeah.
and then go home and do nothing. I absolutely hate that and I feel like I
Right.
fail. You need to be transformed, and the way that needs to be transformed is where you then say, okay, this is actually what I'm going to put into action. These are
Yeah.
things that I'm going to change, like physically going to change in the way that I operate so that I can show up better. And it's not going to be perfect, not even close. But
Yeah.
if you, instead of having 3 or 4 of these days a month, you have two, well, awesome, right? That's a great
Right.
increase. And then you continue to improve from there. And so what do you feel like you need to change? Because there needs to be some foresight. You need to be like, all right, these days, looking at my calendar, this is distracted Blake showing up on these days for sure. And so my
Yeah.
focus time is going to be planned to be out of the office or wherever. Is that a way for you to forecast and make some changes, or is there something else that you can put into action here?
I think the really easy one to put into action is like because I do deep work every morning, and to say like, cool, let's like get that away, like actually different location where possible,
Hmm.
and away from kind of the digital world as much as possible. I think that like that's really straightforward and pretty clear.
Okay.
Um, and I think that's like a very practical thing I can do tomorrow. Um,
Okay.
on the other stuff of asking the question of like how distracted is Blake today, I feel like that thing I need to get a little bit clever on that because so much of my afternoons are meeting driven. And sometimes I've got 30 minutes in between meetings. And it's like, how do I leverage that time cleverly is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that one I feel like I need to be more realistic probably. I'm like, oh, I'm tired today, and I've got a half hour meeting every half hour. Like that was a weird pattern I had today, right? Where it's like a one, a two, a three, and four,
Yeah.
right? And then,
Mess.
but not a 1:30, a 2:30, a three, right? What do you do with that? And probably
Yeah.
just being realistic about that and saying, cool, let's even schedule a break for the middle one. If I do
Hmm.
this, then I'll get a break here, right? Um,
Totally. Yeah. Do you feel like you don't have license to have that break, like
oh
that
yeah,
you need? Yeah.
yeah, right. And that's the diligent dinosaur thing, right? That's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. Like, well,
yeah,
who are you? You're gonna take a 30-minute nap? Like nobody does that.
right.
Only
Yes,
losers
I
take 30-minute
know,
naps.
and I know that's the right answer. I actually know that that would help. It's just
Yeah.
difficult to do.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think actually foresight, like just using that word again, if you're looking at that day and you're like, oh, dude, this is a mess. Like, these 30
Yeah.
minutes, like there's nothing you can even get into in that time. And maybe
Yes.
even plotting in on your calendar, Blake takes a nap
Yeah.
and knowing that you're like, no, I planned this ahead of time. Like Blake
Yeah.
takes a nap, then you're like, oh, I planned for that. And so that when it comes up and you're like, oh, I can't take a nap. I don't have time. You're like, no, no, no. I remember what it felt like when I planned this, that I
Yes.
needed it. And this was the right move. So I think that sort of planning ahead, it's just like, again, like diet.
Yeah.
It's like, don't find yourself in a place where you got to eat chips and fries. It's like, no,
Right.
I pack snacks with me because I know
Yeah.
that I'm going to be in a place where it's kind of a gap between lunch and dinner, and there's not really any good food nearby. I'm packing protein in a shaker bottle with me, so I don't have to eat
Yeah.
that junk. And then all of a sudden you're eating better, right? And so I think for
Right.
you, it's like looking at that calendar and be like, all right, this is a spot where I
Be
probably waste a bunch
realistic.
of time.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. And so I think that's sort of planning ahead. And then also, I think founders are weird. Like we don't give ourselves much license. Like we'll see it in somebody else, but in
Yes.
ourselves, we're like, no, I'm not taking a break. I don't do that. I got a lot to do.
Yeah.
So I think if you planned ahead for that break, then you're gonna more than likely take it. It's just like date night with your wife and everything else. Like if
Yep.
it's not on the calendar, it's never gonna happen. So hopefully that's helpful for you. A big part of what I do is extreme accountability. So I'm going to be checking in on you.
Yes.
I'll give
That's
you,
the thing. Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. As you said that, I'll be like, I'll do that because you're telling me to do it. But that's really hard. Like the idea of like scheduling a break in the calendar is very difficult for me. The only way I do that is if you would check up on me.
So I'm going to check in next Wednesday. So I'll just under a week, and just ask you how it's going.
All right. Okay.
Again, founders are really funny. Um, you don't want to fail. Like
Oh no,
you want to
I'm
win.
so externally motivated. Like absolutely. Just if someone says they'll check up on me, I do it. Yeah.
Yes. That's what's so powerful about it. So,
Yeah.
well, dude, I don't know. Are we up on a time break or can I share one more tool? Where are we at on time here?
It's
I don't
fine.
want to go.
We can go another 5 minutes. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Was this helpful?
Absolutely. This is great.
Okay.
I'm like,
Okay.
I'm going to try this thing out. So that, I mean, even if nobody watches this, I got some benefit out of it. This is great.
Good. Perfect. I love it, man. One last tidbit that I think is really, really powerful. That let me fit slide here so you guys can see it. That I want people to take away and to let me share screen here real quick. And to have in their back pocket. And I shared this with you a little bit pre-recording, is this idea of a self-preservation wall. And the actual full illustration, let's see, do I have it here? Is this. And the reason that this is even important or applicable is that when you're having conversation or communication or you're working with a team member or a client or whoever, we both have these virtual self-preservation walls that are up. And if somebody says their guard's up or their flag's up, this is what this
Mm-hmm.
is, right? And it's because we haven't built any trust yet.
Hmm.
And then once we build trust, self-preservation walls can come down. But also with the building blocks in here are not just character, chemistry, competency, and credibility, right? So how we build trust. This is how everybody builds trust. These four ingredients, some are heavier than others, is we have our own self-preservation wall in that we're trying to keep from losing something, we're trying to hide something, or we're trying to prove something.
Mm.
And the reason I wanted to end on this is because, the I think it's an Andreessen quote. It's like strong opinions loosely held. It's one of my favorite quotes. I can't remember exactly who said it. That's what this is. It's like you can have a strong conviction,
Hmm.
and but you need to be okay being wrong, right?
Hmm.
And so a lot of times, if you audit the situation where you showed up and the conversation went sideways and you're like, man, I kind of said some things that I maybe wouldn't normally say, or I pushed an agenda that I probably shouldn't have. It's
Yeah.
one, if not all three of these ingredients. And
Hmm.
so someone is trying to like prove their point, but they're trying to hide the fact that they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just trying not to lose the argument, or they're trying not to lose the client. And then you say things you probably shouldn't. It's like when you felt this, Blake, like you sign on a client you knew you shouldn't have signed him on
Yeah.
or her on. You know you shouldn't
Yeah.
have, but you didn't want to lose the deal, right?
Yeah.
And you
Totally.
want
Been
to, and
there.
you're kind of hiding the fact that it's kind of not a great fit, but I kind of need the cash or we need the business or whatever, right? And
Sure.
instead you show up and you're like, you know what? You're not, I'm sorry. Here's just, this is not a good fit. And you're just like frank and honest and open. Your
Hmm.
self-preservation wall's down. And what's locked in between your wall and theirs is relationship. And until you
Hmm.
have relationship, you can't have influence and impact with that client, vendor, team member, spouse, kid, whoever, right?
Hmm.
And your wall needs to come down first. And so thinking about certain things, and so when I go into a meeting, man, when I can remember, which is most of the time now, I say I've got nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose.
You actually
And
like
so
say that out
I say
loud to the person or to yourself
no
or
to myself. Yeah, to the
yeah.
person, I would look like a total wackadoo. Uh,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, to myself, it's like, man, I got nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose here.
Mm.
And for me, what goes along with that is that then you start showing up secure, confident, and humble. And that's so powerful and disarming because now you're gonna represent yourself and the company in a way that is in line with your ethics, in line with what you're trying to build, and with the client or the person on the other side of you's best interest.
Mm.
And you're not going to drive an agenda that maybe shouldn't be driven. And if they've brought up some data that maybe means that your idea is wrong, you're going to be like, yeah, you know what,
That's
Blake,
great. Yeah, good to know.
your idea is way better, man. You're right.
Mm.
And so when you're in conversations and when somebody else is doing this or
Hmm.
not doing this, you're like, what the heck's wrong with them? I just gave them all this information and they're like so adamant that their idea is the best and it's so clear that it's wrong. That's what this is. They just don't want to lose the argument or they just don't
Yeah.
like you. And so they're not going to like your idea. And so when you learn this and you exude these sorts of attributes, that's again
Yes.
a liberated leader can then liberate others. A leader that knows themselves can then help other people know themselves. You start to disarm
Hmm.
other folks, and they start to be open to be like, yeah, man, strong opinions loosely held. That sort of mentality. They're like, yeah, you know what? I can lose the argument. That's okay. I got
Yes.
nothing to prove. I got nothing to hide. And then
The hard
this,
the hard part with this is that I think it's that if you go to the second slide on here, the humble, that one, yeah. I feel like when I feel secure and confident, I show up with slide 41, the slide before there. When I feel that way,
yeah,
then I feel like I don't. The problem is that when I'm feeling the opposite, it's I feel like it almost flows the opposite direction. If I'm feeling insecure, that's when I'm going to show up with something to prove and something to hide, right? Like I
uh-huh,
think a lot about 4 years ago when we sold our company. That sale was not financially lucrative for me, and it
mm,
felt like a big secret for me,
mm,
which is that people are high-fiving me on LinkedIn, and I'm sitting here being like, how am I going to make money fast? Like we do
yeah,
not make enough money. Like, I got a bunch of kids. Like, what am I going to do? Right. But I need to project this visible thing of success while in reality, I'm hiding the fact that I actually, people want to work with me because they think I'm a success. And on the inside, I kind of know I, that wasn't that successful. In fact, it was a failure for many of our investors. Um, and so I feel like that, like, I think I showed up as probably insecure, arrogant, prideful. Because, I was doing that sort of thing. And what's happened over the course of the past 4 years is like enough time has transpired, and I've had enough other wins that I feel a little bit more like, you know what, it's actually okay. In fact, I now in client meetings, I lead with that. I
yeah,
say, hey, I sold my company, and before you're impressed, like I didn't make hardly anything on it. And
mm,
the truth is that happens to a lot of us, but here's what's happened since then. Like I feel like, and it's actually, I've had way more connection with people, and I've actually probably won more deals telling people that than I did when I tried to fake like I'm a huge success and now I'm on my yacht, or like whatever. Like I
yeah.
overplayed my hand, and I think it actually backfired.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about what you just said? And I've always said this, people can smell it.
Yeah,
They can
totally.
smell it. They're like, wait, I don't know if Blake believes what he just said to me.
Yeah.
Hmm. Something feels weird there. You know,
Hmm.
when you meet someone and you're like, I don't even know who they are.
Yep.
I was just saying it to a friend. I'm like, I don't know who they are. Who is that person? And they're like, what do you mean? You've talked to them a bunch of times. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know who they are. Like, you can just
Hmm.
feel that they've got this wall up or this facade. People
Yes.
can feel it. And so that's why people are connecting with you now, telling the true story is because they're like, dude, that's real.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
And it's rare for people to share that. Like, man,
Yeah.
you had an exit. Oh, okay, interesting. That's relatable. And they can
Hmm.
feel that. And then their walls come down and you can build relationship. And now you're saying you signed on more clients like that than the other way, which is the definition of you now being able to have influence and impact with them. And so
Hmm.
the same thing happens with team members, with family members, with community is when you can show up like that. So to me, it's probably a little bit of the gray hair too. When somebody's talking about something and they're using acronyms and words that clearly they think I should know,
Yeah.
I'll go just like this. Like, Blake, time out. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's so disarming because they're like, oh, okay. And then they get to share their knowledge and
Hmm.
expertise. But I'm not gonna like walk away and be Googling, like, man, what was Blake talking about? I don't know what this is. And then all it does is create confusion. And now
Yeah.
they're not gonna trust you because they're like, wait, Blake acting like he knew what he's talking about. And you've had these conversations. They act like
Hmm.
they knew what they're talking about, but then I see their product and they're like, oh, clearly they had no idea what the
Yeah.
heck I wish they would have just said they didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky thing to coach in people too.
Hmm.
You have to reassure them like it's okay
Hmm.
to show a little bit of vulnerability. That's really
Hmm.
good.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, anyways, I wanted to leave you with that, man. And I think that so the homework for you are these two things as far as like, planning to do the deep work away and scheduling the breaks. So I'll check in with you on Wednesday. And I think that for the viewer, like take some time out to list some tendencies. And so whether, Blake, you had a tendency that was like right on the tip of your tongue and you knew it, and I prepped you a little bit. So if you don't know a tendency, think about a reality that's not so positive
Hmm.
when people are on the other side of you and it's like, man, I don't really like the way that Peter's showing up in these situations. And you can work backwards and find the root tendency. And it's such a simple thing. I think sometimes when people see frameworks like this, they're like, well, that's overly simplistic. This is way more
Hmm.
complicated than that. I need to go to therapy for a year. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe
Well,
it's
let's
super
start with the
simple.
PDF. Let's start with the PDF and see if it works.
Yes. There's the MVP, right? Like just start with a
Yeah.
PDF. I love that. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So that's homework for everybody else. And I'm always available, man. I love this work. It's so important to me because it's such high leverage activity. It's just like what you're doing, Blake, in that if you can impact the founders and help a company grow, you impact everybody downstream from them, man. Like all the team
Yeah.
members and the spouses and the kids and the clients and the vendors. I mean, customers, it's just like it's endless. And like your impact, you'll never know, like what my buddy calls your blast zone. You're never gonna know
Hmm.
the of how far reaching the impact was, and that's okay.
Hmm.
You're just knowing that if you can change a few leaders and help them unlock their potential, it's such a cool high leverage activity. So that's why I love it.
I love that. I really love that. Thank you for sharing this. This is useful for me, and I think it's gonna be useful for a lot of people. And I think it just demonstrates the value that you create. So thanks for doing this. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake. Thanks for having me, man. Take care.
Yeah.